Every tattoo tells a story. But what about the blank page? For every person who marks a milestone with ink, there's another who carries that same milestone just as deeply on the inside. The untouched skin isn't an empty canvas, it's a different kind of canvas. Today, we're exploring the untold stories and the sophisticated psychology of people who choose to keep their stories private, mutable, and written in a different ink. Let's be clear from the start. Tattoos are extraordinary. They're ancient, they're art, they're protest, memory, love, grief, and identity made visible. This video isn't here to diminish that. But here's what we don't talk about enough. The choice to not get tattooed is constantly misread. It's seen as hesitation, as being too cautious, too vanilla, too afraid of commitment, as if the absence of ink means an absence of story. What if that's completely wrong? What if staying uninked isn't about having nothing to say, but about choosing a profoundly different way to say it? What if there's a whole psychological architecture beneath that choice, one that's just as deliberate, just as meaningful, and just as deeply human? That's what we're diving into today. Pillar 1. Philosophy of Memory and Preservation. Here's the core idea. Some people experience their most important memories as internal treasures, meant to be felt, revisited, and allowed to evolve inside them, not frozen, not displayed. Think of it like this: a cherished, fading photograph versus a high-definition digital print. One changes with time, the colors shift, the edges soften, and somehow that makes it more precious. The other, permanent, perfect, unchanging. For people who never get tattoos, there's often this instinct, maybe even a reverence for letting memories breathe. They know that grief changes shape, that the way you remember your grandmother when you're 25 is different from how you'll remember her at 55, and they want that freedom. The tattoo, to them, would lock the memory in amber. It would say, "This is how I felt about this moment on June 14th, 2024. And they think, but what if I feel differently in 2034? What if the memory grows? What if it needs to become something else? Now, here's the balance point. A tattooed person might say, that's exactly why I got this ink, to preserve that version of me, to honor who I was in that moment. And that's beautiful too. Same human need, different language. Pillar 2. Commitment to the future self. Here's the psychological truth. Most of us are terrible at imagining our future selves. The core idea? People who choose not to get tattooed often have an unusually strong relationship with the person they will become. They're respectful of that stranger, and they don't want to make permanent aesthetic decisions on their behalf. It's like this. You wouldn't choose a permanent soundtrack for a movie that's still being filmed, would you? You're in Act 1. The music that feels perfect right now, that song that defines your heartbreak, your rebellion, your spiritual awakening, might feel jarring, even embarrassing in Act 3. This isn't about shame, it's about humility. It's recognizing that you are a work in progress, that your values shift, your aesthetics evolve. The symbols that move you at 22 might feel like relics at 42. There's actual cognitive science here. It's called the end of history illusion. We all believe we've finally become who we really are, right now. We underestimate how much will change. People who avoid tattoos, they've often internalized this lesson deeply. They think, I don't know who I'll be yet, and I want to leave room for her, for him, for them. Now, the tattooed perspective, this mark is my evolution. It's a chapter. I can add more chapters and more ink. Also valid, also wise. Just a different relationship with permanence. Pillar 3. The Aesthetics of Potential. Philosophy of Space and Minimalism. This one's subtle, but powerful. The core idea, for some people, the unmarked body represents pure potential, not emptiness, potential. Think of it like the power of a blank page in a writer's notebook versus a beautifully illuminated manuscript. One says, look at what has been created. The other says, look at what could be created. There's an aesthetic philosophy here,
sometimes rooted in minimalism, sometimes in Eastern philosophies of emptiness as fullness. The idea that the unmarked space is not waiting to be filled, it is complete in its openness. For these individuals, the story isn't meant to be on the body. The story is the body, how it moves through the world, how it ages, the scars it earns naturally, the way it holds a child, builds a home, runs a marathon, weathers illness. They see tattoos, however beautiful, as additions to a work that's already complete, and they prefer the original version. It's not about fear of pain, it's not about lacking stories, it's about believing that their skin, as it is enough, that they are the art. And again, the tattooed person might say, "My ink enhances my story. It makes the art richer." Absolutely true. Same canvas, different artistic vision.
So what does this psychological stance actually create in a life? First, a certain freedom from aesthetic regret. Not because tattooed people always regret their ink, most don't, but because the decision was never made. The door remains open. There's a quiet comfort in that. Second, they often project a kind of intrigue, a blank slate effect. When you meet them, you're reading the person, not the symbols. There's mystery in that. The story unfolds through conversation, not through observation. Third, their self-expression tends to flow through action rather than symbol. They're often the people who express identity through what they do, the books they read, the places they travel, the causes they champion, the way they love. It's not better, it's just different. It's expression through living, not through marking. These aren't the advantages, they're natural outcomes, the ripple effects of a particular way of seeing the self, time, and permanence.
Remember that blank page from the beginning? Here's the reframe. The uninked body is not a blank page waiting for a story. It is a living manuscript where the story is written in experiences, relationships, growth, loss, joy, and time. The skin itself is simply aging as the parchment of a life well lived. The wrinkles that form, those are punctuation marks. The scars earned, those are the plot twists. The way the body moves differently at 60 than it did at 20, that's character development. Both choices, ink or no ink, are ultimately about the same profound human drive to navigate identity, memory, and time. To say, I was here, I mattered, this meant something. They're just different dialects of the same language, and the world needs both.
So here's what I want you to think about. Not whether one choice is better, but this. Do you carry your most important stories on your skin or in your mind? And what does that choice feel like for you? Drop your answer in the comments, not to debate, just to share. Because understanding why we make the choices we make, that's how we see each other, really see each other. If this gave you a new way to think about an old question, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of everyday choices, and share this with someone, tattooed or not, who might need to feel seen today. Every body tells a story. Every silence speaks volumes.